Hello and welcome back to the 80-Hour Developer. In the last video, we had just set up the Auth scaffold in Laravel, and we noticed that we got an error because we hadn't set up our database. So let's fix that error now and then crank through the next couple tickets. So it's telling us that it can't find the user homestead at localhost. What that means is that in our .env file, it's still using the default database settings. And so what we need to do is tell it that we're using the username of root and password, because I don't set any security on my local machine. Obviously on the production machine we will, and we'll get into that in the second part of this, where we move everything to a live server. But for now, we're going to use a database that we'll call ticketing, or tickets. So let's go into our SQL Pro. I am going to create a new database, and we'll call it tickets. Perfect. It's got nothing in it. So if you'll remember from the Laracast videos, one of the things that we have to do is to run the migrations to populate our database. So I'm going to use my shortcut AF, which is short for PHP Artisan Migrate Fresh. And what that does is it deletes any tables that are in your database and then reruns your migrations from the start. Okay? So when I refresh this, we're going to see that I now have a users, password resets, and migrations table. And when I come over here and try to load this, I just get brought back and it says that there's no credentials that match for that user, which is what we would expect. So we immediately run into a problem here, right? We can't actually get into our own app. So there's a few ways we can deal with this. One of my favorites, though, especially at the start of a project, is I will just come into the migrations, and in the users table, I will create a new user with my information. Okay? So this is a great place for us to talk about model factories, which is a whole new concept. You might have seen Jeff talk about it a little bit on Laracasts, but the concept is pretty simple. What we want to be able to do is say, let's create a new user. And what we might want to do is to say, I want the email to be Sean, and I want the password and here we're going to do password. Okay, and in fact, let's just do this. Okay, so we're going to import our app user. So we're using this first or create syntax, and we're saying give me a user, and we can give it a name. Okay, so now let's come back out and rerun our migrations. But now, when we come to our user table, we see that we have this user in place. So now I can come up here, put in my email address, type in password, and now it logs me in. So now we can see that we're logged in. We've got our user drop down here, and now we're free to actually play around in our app. Okay? So we've got our auth set up. This is wonderful. But you might be saying, Sean, I remember in your software workflow, you said that you need to create a new branch and then create a test. Then write code and upgrade your tests in a loop. What do I mean by that? I haven't created a test yet. And you're right, you caught me out. So this is the video where we're going to talk about test-driven development. Hopefully you watched the Jeff Way Introduction to Testing in the Laravel 5.4 from Scratch series. I don't want to get too deep into it, but I will say that I think that any application that you're writing should have an extremely robust test suite. And what I mean by that is that you've got a way that you can automatically check whether or not all of your code is working the way you expect it to work. So let's do this. Let's take a look at what our Git is telling us. What's changed? We've changed our migration, we've changed our web, and we've added all these new things. Okay, so I think we're happy with that. And this is TI2, so we set up Auth and added ourselves as a user. Okay, and I'm going to come back to develop. And remember, if I'm in develop now, I don't have any of this anymore. All right, if I go to tickets test, I don't even have the login and registration because I haven't run my make auth in the develop branch. So this is where we're going to merge in. I'm happy with everything in TI2. And so what this has done is it's pulled all of the files from TI2 in, it's overwritten any changes, and now our develop branch and branch TI2 are exactly the same. We've merged in TI2 to develop. Okay, so now in develop, if I reload this, I get the home, I don't have a logout route, and this is telling me that, there we go. Okay, so I was still logged in even though I'd changed branches. So now if I go to login, here we go, right? And my databases remain the same. If I run AF and clear it out, I'm still going to have myself. One of the things that's interesting though is take a look at this password. And when I run AF, I'm going to refresh it now and you're going to see this change. Okay, so this is what's called a hashed password. That means that it can't be decrypted. It's extremely secure. This will only match up if the text that I give it matches up with the text that I put in the first time. So I can't say, decrypt whatever this is and find out Sean's password. It's a great way to handle things like passwords so that you can ensure that you're running a secure app, you're not exposing passwords to anybody, and in fact, there's no reason to ever show somebody their password. Or if they need to reset it, we can set up email resets so that they can reset it. We never need to show a password. We as administrators don't need to know what anybody's password is, so we use hashing here versus encryption. The difference is encryption, you can decrypt it. Right? So we can have an encrypted field in this database, but I might need to show that field within. So if I encrypted the email address, I would have to decrypt that to show it on the page. That means that there is a way to go backwards. With a hashed value like a password, you can't go backwards. Okay, so that's my little digression there. We've talked about merging, we've talked about hashing here. So let's talk about testing. So we're going to come back into the ticketing app, and I have set up the auth that was in progress, and now it's done. So what do I want to be able to? I want a user to be able to create a new ticket, but I also don't want somebody who's not logged in to be able to get to home. What do I expect to happen if I go to home and I'm not logged in? Well, this is pretty much what I expect, right? I get pushed back to the login page. Okay, so let's write a test to make sure that that actually happens every time. So we're going to say in my ticket, I'm going to create a new ticket for this. Create test to ensure so this is TI12. Okay, you're going to get very familiar with this workflow. We create a ticket, we check out the ticket, and then we start writing. So I'm going to make a test, make test, and we will call this, let's call it a homepage test. So if we want, we can type in get status to see what's changed. We see that in our tests feature directory, we get a homepage test. Okay, so a little bit of scaffolding here. I've got a live template that automatically generates a test in this format for me. So user Okay. I will explain this shortly. For now, we're going to write our test. So, what do we want to have happen? I think I would like to be able to say something like, if the user visits home, then we should expect to see that the page is login. But then, if we type in and we type in this to the password, and we press login, that we should see page is home. So this isn't going to work for us. I'm going to run this one test, and it's going to say it doesn't know what I mean by visit. So in older Laravel code, this was shipped with the system. With newer Laravel, we need to actually pull in a package to make this work. So we're going to go here. And I do this at the start of every project. I pull in browser kit testing. Okay, so when we go to the GitHub page, we're going to see the instructions for it. Perfect. Okay, and then it tells us we need to modify our test base case. So let's do that as well. Testing test case. Okay. And I'm going to pause this while we wait for Composer to add in the required files. Wonderful, and we're ready to roll now. So we're in here. PHP Storm's going to do its thing and update so that it knows where everything lives. We're going to see that. When we come back to our homepage test, it actually understands what these items are. Perfect. So now we're going to run this individual test. We see green, it passes. All right. What happens though if we try to tell it to type in a password that's wrong? So I'll just put a Z at the end of that. That's going to tell us that it fails. It expects to be on page home, but instead it got pushed back to page login. And that makes sense, right? If we're here and we type in the wrong password, what happens? Well, it tells us the credentials don't match our records. That's great. So this is really important when we're testing. We want to make sure that it fails the way that we expect it to fail. Okay? So now what do we have? We have this ability to run PHP unit. Right now we've got 3 tests. One of them is, or 2 of them were generated by Laravel, and we can get rid of them. Let's take a look at our testing. In our tests, we are going to get rid of this example test, and we're going to get rid of this example test. So now if I run PHP unit, I get 1 test, and it passes. So if at any point in the future I do anything that breaks this functionality of authorization, like let's say that accidentally I come into my web and I comment out this auth routes. When I run PHP unit, it fails. It immediately tells me, Sean, something went wrong. When I put it back, here we go. So my tests pass. I'm going to add this. I'm going to commit this. Okay, so we have written our first test, and we have installed the browser kit package that allows us to write tests that I think look pretty good. We visit, we see the page as that. We type, we press, we see the page as that. This makes sense to me. I'm going to talk about a couple of things in testing. One is that if you don't have this little comment string here to tell PHP unit that this is a test, then you need to start your test name with the word test. So if I write a function here and I call this dev test says hello. Let's say I want to visit the test route and I want to see hello. Okay? You might think I could do something like this. PHP unit filter dev test says hello, but it can't find it. It doesn't recognize this as a test. Instead, I need to do this. Okay, and it says, hey, I don't see that. I see hello develop branch. That makes sense. Let's go to our dev test. Let's change it. Now we'll run the test and it passes. So now we run our PHP unit, both tests pass. Great. We see there's 2 files that have changed. Oops. Okay. So we can write our tests either with test underscore and whatever we want our test name, or we can put this above it. Okay, and then we can delete this test thing. And both tests pass. So I've written a live template. When I type in TE and press enter, I immediately get this and it's ready for me to put in the name of my test. Okay, I suggest that you do something similar just to make this process a little easier for yourself, but obviously that's optional. So I'm going to delete this test because, actually no, I'm going to leave this in here. I like having a dev test controller just to do any kind of weird logic, and sometimes I want to test out some PHP code. I might want to say, I forget how variables work, so will this work? Now if I go to my test, notice I don't need to be logged in. Anybody can see it. And yes, I do see hello. Wonderful. Okay. And if I go to reload my, my test page here, perfect. This is reloaded. I see hello, this is my variable. I know this works. Great. Okay. I might decide I want to inline this with my refactoring tool. So I've set up a shortcut to do this. So now I don't need that variable, right? Or if I want to turn this into a variable, there's a shortcut for that. So this is often what I use the dev test controller for. It's just a place for me to play around, to see what's happening, and then I just make sure that when my tests are finished, it just says hello. And it's always going to end with hello. Okay, and oh, this is telling me that it's not saying that. Why not? Interesting. So it doesn't, oh, because it's not recognizing the echo. It's expecting this to return something. That makes sense. So if I return the hello string, that works. And then if I inline this, we're back to where we were. Okay. So we can see here I've made some changes. I think I'll keep these changes. So let's go back to develop. And remember, if we come back to our tests, we're not going to see our homepage test anymore because we haven't merged in that branch. So let's merge in TI12. And we see we got rid of the example tests, but we now have our homepage test. Perfect. So I'm going to come back to my ticketing app, and I'm going to move this over. So we created a test to ensure only logged in users can see the home page. So at this point, you might be thinking, Sean, testing seems stupid. It seems like a lot of extra work. If I want to make sure that only logged in users can do that, I can just go to my page. I can go to tickets.test home and see if it kicks me back out. And you're absolutely right. And if the only thing your software ever had to do was to make sure that nobody who wasn't logged in could get in, then you probably wouldn't need your tests. But what you're going to find is that software grows quickly, and you're going to have thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of lines of code that are all interacting with each other, and you may not be confident that everything is always working the way that you expect, right? Sometimes you might make a change and it's only supposed to affect one piece of functionality in your application, and for whatever reason, it completely disables your security. You want tests in place to let you know that. Tests are incredibly helpful. They're incredibly beneficial. There's a great sense of security to knowing that at the very least, everything you thought of to write a test about is working the way that you expect. At least once a week, when I'm writing code for my clients, I find that there's something that I had overlooked, something I hadn't thought of, something that would have broken the system for them if I didn't have my test suite in place. And it catches it, it lets me see where the problem popped up, makes it really easy to debug it. So, even before I merge something into my develop branch, let alone into production, I run the tests and I make sure that the entire app is working the way that I expect. So that's why testing is a huge part of the workflow, and it's something we're going to use extensively for every ticket that we create. Okay, so we're doing the very, very bare basics of getting our site up and running, but we've got something. We can log in, we've got our home page. In the next video, we're going to start adding functionality to this through testing. All right, hope you guys have enjoyed this, and I will talk to you shortly.